I pulled into the empty parking lot of Sunny Valley gas station just as the sun was setting. The place sat isolated on the highway outside Cedar Falls, Iowa, my new home of exactly 2 weeks. The now hiring sign that had been taped to the door last week was gone, replaced by nothing. That seemed promising. I hoped the job was mine. My car shuddered as I turned off the engine. The poor thing had barely survived the drive from Chicago to this small town. I checked my watch. 7:45 p.m., 15 minutes early for my first night shift. I really needed this job. Moving to Cedar Falls hadn't been my first choice, or any choice really. After losing my apartment and most of my savings in Chicago, my only option was to crash with my cousin until I got back on my feet. A night shift at a gas station wasn't glamorous, but it paid, and that's all that mattered right now. The front door jingled as I walked in. The interior looked like any other gas station. Rows of snacks, coolers along the back wall, a counter with cigarettes behind it, and the distinct smell of coffee mixed with cleaning products. "Hello," I called out. A shuffling sound came from behind the counter, and a middle-aged man popped up like he'd been searching for something on the floor. "You must be Michael," he said, brushing his hands on his uniform shirt. "Right on time." "I'm Jerry." I walked over and shook his hand. His palm felt clammy and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Working nights will do that to you," I figured. "Thanks for giving me the job," I said. "I appreciate it." Jerry nodded, glancing toward the windows. "Let's get started on your training. I want to finish before it gets completely dark." For the next hour, Jerry showed me the basics. How to use the register, where the stock was kept, how to check in deliveries, and the closing procedures. All standard stuff. He was thorough but rushed, constantly checking his watch or looking out the windows as darkness fell outside. "The place is pretty slow at night," Jerry explained as he showed me how to count the till. "Mostly truckers and the occasional local who need something after the grocery stores close." I nodded, trying to remember everything he was telling me. The job seemed straightforward enough. "That covers most of the normal stuff," Jerry said, closing the register drawer. Then he paused, his expression changing. "But there's something else you need to know." He reached under the counter and pulled out an old leather notebook. The corners were frayed and the leather was cracked. "The rules?" Jerry said, holding it like it was something precious and dangerous simultaneously. "Rules?" I asked. "Rules for the night shift," he clarified, placing the notebook on the counter between us. "These are important, Michael. Very important." I opened the notebook, expecting to find standard company policies. Instead, I found a handwritten list that made no sense. 1. Don't let the man with the light bulb head stay too long. 9 minutes maximum. 2. Allow the woman in the red coat to buy a single beer. Do not comment on her appearance or behavior. 3. Hide from the tall man with the wide-brimmed hat. Do not let him see you. 4. Never go outside between 2 to 3 a.m. for any reason. I looked up at Jerry, waiting for him to laugh and tell me it was some kind of initiation prank, but his face remained completely serious. "What is this?" I asked, tapping the notebook. Jerry ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, I know how it sounds, but these rules aren't a joke. They keep you safe." "Safe from what?" "People with weird headwear." I tried to smile, but Jerry's expression killed my attempt at humor. "Craig Patterson didn't think the rules were serious either," Jerry said quietly. "Who's Craig?" "The guy who had this job before you." Jerry looked down at his hands. "He broke Rule 3. The tall man. He saw Craig." A chill ran through me, not because I believed him, but because of how convinced Jerry seemed. "What happened to him?" I asked, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Jerry looked up, his eyes locking with mine. I found what was left of him behind the dumpsters. The police never figured out what animal could have done that to a person. My stomach tightened. Either this was the most elaborate prank I'd ever experienced, or Jerry actually believed what he was saying. So, you're telling me these customers are dangerous? I'm telling you that the rules keep bad things from happening, Jerry said. Just follow them exactly as written. I looked through the rest of the notebook. There were no explanations, no details about why these rules existed or what would happen if they were broken, apart from what supposedly happened to Craig. The light bulb head guy. What does that even mean? I asked. You'll know him when you see him, Jerry said, checking his watch again. Trust me. Just remember, 9 minutes. That's all he gets. After that, just tell him he needs to leave. He always listens. This was getting weirder by the second. And the woman in the red coat. She'll buy a beer, just one. Ring her up, take her money, and say nothing else to her. Jerry's voice had taken on an almost chanting quality, like he'd said these words many times before. The tall man. If you hear the door chime and see a tall man in a wide-brimmed hat, hide immediately. Don't let him see you. There's a space under the counter that's perfect. I closed the notebook. And I can't go outside between 2 and 3 a.m. because... Jerry shook his head. Just don't. Not for anyone or anything. Not if you hear screaming. Not if the building catches fire. Not if the president himself shows up. You stay inside during that hour. The conviction in his voice made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Part of me wanted to hand back the notebook and walk out, but I needed this job. And if playing along with Jerry's delusions was part of it, I could manage that. I should get going, Jerry said, gathering his things. The night shift is all yours now. Remember the rules, Michael. Your life depends on it. He went toward the door, then turned back. One more thing, keep that notebook with you at all times. Don't leave it where customers can see it. Then he was gone. The door jingling behind him, leaving me alone in the brightly lit gas station with a notebook full of bizarre instructions. I sat on the stool behind the counter, flipping through the notebook again. Was this some kind of psychological test? Or maybe Jerry was messing with the new guy. But that story about Craig felt too specific, too grim to be made up on the spot. I set the notebook aside and tidied up the counter area. The rational part of my brain said this was all nonsense. People don't have light bulbs for heads. The tall man and the woman in the red coat were probably regular customers that Jerry had built into bogeymen to make the night shift less boring. Yet, I couldn't shake the genuine fear I'd seen in Jerry's eyes. He believed these rules mattered. He believed breaking them got Craig killed. I picked up the notebook again. Maybe it was better to be safe than sorry. I tucked it into my pocket where I could easily reach it. The clock on the wall read 9:17 p.m. The night stretched ahead of me, long and suddenly full of uncertainty. I leaned back on the stool, torn between dismissing Jerry's rules as complete nonsense and the nagging worry that there might be something to them after all. The clock on the wall behind the counter read 12:23 a.m. 3 hours into my first night shift and boredom had fully set in. I'd organized the candy display twice, checked the coolers to make sure everything was fully stocked, and even swept behind the counter. Anything to keep my mind off Jerry's weird notebook of rules. I kept it in my pocket, though, not because I believed in glowing-headed customers or the mysterious woman in a red coat, but because Jerry seemed so dead serious about it. And on the off chance this wasn't some elaborate prank, I didn't want to end up like Craig Patterson. The gas station remained quiet. Outside, a single streetlight lit up the empty parking lot. An occasional car sped past on the highway, headlights briefly piercing the darkness before disappearing. None stopped. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through job listings in Cedar Falls. Maybe I could find something less creepy for tomorrow. But the pay here was decent, and night shifts meant fewer customers to deal with. Plus, I needed the money. My bank account couldn't handle another week of unemployment. The door chimed. I looked up, ready to greet my first customer of the night, and the words died in my throat. A man stood just inside the entrance. He was average height, wearing ordinary jeans and a dark jacket, but his head wasn't right. It was oversized, round, and gave off a steady yellow-white glow. The light pulsed slightly, like a bulb with a bad connection. Rule number 1 from Jerry's notebook flashed in my mind. Don't let the man with the light bulb head stay too long. 9 minutes maximum. I blinked hard. This couldn't be real. Maybe lack of sleep was making me hallucinate. But when I opened my eyes, light bulb head was still there, moving slowly through the chip aisle. He didn't grab anything, just walked along, looking at the shelves with a head that literally glowed like a lamp. I checked the time. 12:24 a.m. 9 minutes, Jerry had said. I started counting. Light bulb head moved to the candy section next. His movements were oddly calm and purposeful, like he was following a set path through the store. No other features were visible. The glow was too bright to make out any actual face. Was there a face under there or just more light? I wanted to laugh at how crazy this was. Maybe Jerry was playing an elaborate joke. Maybe this was a guy with some kind of costume or prop. But deep down I knew this wasn't normal. The way the light bounced off surfaces looked too real, too physical. The minutes dragged by. Light bulb head moved to check out the magazines, then the small automotive section, then back to the snacks. He never picked anything up, never acknowledged my presence, just browsed. At 12:32, I checked my phone again. 8 minutes had passed. 1 more minute, I whispered to myself. Light bulb head was now by the coffee station, his glow making the metal containers look almost bronze in the strange light. 9 minutes were almost up, and according to Jerry's rules, I needed to make him leave. What would happen if I didn't? Would Jerry know? Would something bad happen? This was ridiculous, getting worked up over some guy with a weird head, but Jerry's fear when he told me the rules hadn't seemed fake. The clock hit 12:33 a.m. I took a deep breath and walked out from behind the counter. "Excuse me," I said, my voice shakier than I wanted it to be. "I think you need to leave now." Light bulb head turned toward me. The movement was smooth, not threatening. For a few seconds, he just stood there. Then, without any resistance or acknowledgement, he turned and walked to the door. The chime sounded as he left, and I watched through the windows as his glowing figure crossed the parking lot and simply disappeared at the edge of the property. Not got into a car, not walked into the trees, just disappeared. I went back behind the counter, my legs feeling strangely unsteady. I took out Jerry's notebook and looked at the first rule. 9 minutes maximum. Exactly 9 minutes. What the hell is going on here? I said out loud, needing to hear a normal human voice, even if it was just my own. I tried to make sense of what I'd just seen. Maybe it was a guy with a fancy costume. Maybe this whole thing was some weird local tradition where people messed with the new night shift worker. But none of those ideas felt right. For the next 20 minutes, no customers came in. I tried to distract myself by checking my phone, but I kept looking up at the door, expecting to see that strange glow return. At 12:57 a.m., the door chimed again. A woman walked in wearing a red coat. She was average height with brown hair, and she went straight for the beer cooler at the back of the store. Rule number 2, allow the woman in the red coat to buy a single beer. Do not comment on her appearance or behavior. This couldn't be a coincidence. 2 of Jerry's weird rules coming true in one night. The woman picked a single bottle of beer and came to the counter. Her eyes never met mine, looking at some point near the floor. She set the beer down and pulled out a credit card. When she handed it to me, I saw the name, Emma. I rang up the beer without saying anything, following Rule 2 exactly. My hand touched hers as I gave back the credit card, and I noticed how cold her skin felt. Not just cool from the outside air, but ice cold. Emma took her beer and left without a word or glance. No thank you, Jorg, good night. Nothing. I watched her through the windows as she walked to the edge of the parking lot, then turned and went along the highway. No car. Where was she going? The nearest houses were miles away. After Emma went out of sight, I pulled out Jerry's notebook again. 2 for 2 on the weird rules, which meant I checked the time. 1:10 a.m. Rule 3, hide from the tall man with the wide-brimmed hat. Do not let him see you. According to Jerry, the tall man had killed Craig Patterson, or what was left of him had been found behind the dumpsters. Jerry had made that part very clear. I looked at the space under the counter where Jerry had shown me I could hide. It was cramped, but big enough for someone to squeeze into if they needed to. Part of me wanted to dismiss all this as nonsense. But after Lightbulbhead and Emma in her red coat, I couldn't ignore the pattern. These rules matched real people, or whatever these visitors were. The minutes ticked by. 1:20 a.m. 1:35 a.m. The store remained empty. I tried passing time by checking stock in the back room, but I kept coming back to the counter, watching the clock and the front door. 1:45 a.m. The door chimed. A tall figure stepped inside, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that hid his face in shadow. He wore a long coat despite the warm summer night, his hands tucked into deep pockets. Rule 3 screamed in my head. Hide. Don't let him see you. But I didn't move. I stood frozen behind the counter, watching as the tall man noticed me and slowly began walking forward. Each step he took was careful, steady. He moved directly toward the counter where I stood, frozen with fear. This was the man Jerry said had killed Craig. I should be hiding right now. I should be under the counter. But my body wouldn't respond. The tall man stopped in front of the counter. Up close, I could see his hands. Normal human hands, rough but ordinary. He reached up toward his hat. I backed up against the cigarette display, nearly knocking several packs to the floor. The tall man lifted his hat, revealing his face. I had to stop myself from gasping. His face was badly scarred. Scar tissue pulled his features into a twisted smile on one side. One eye sat lower than the other, and patches of skin had a strange texture, like wax that had melted and hardened again. But his eyes were alert, intelligent, and very human. He reached into his coat pocket. I tensed, expecting a weapon, but instead he pulled out a folded piece of paper. He placed it on the counter and slid it toward me. I hesitated, then picked it up and unfolded it. In messy handwriting, it read, "He's lying. Jerry is not who you think he is. Be careful." I looked up, questions forming, but the tall man put his finger to his lips, signaling me to be quiet. Then he put his hat back on, gave me a slight nod, and turned away. I watched him walk to the door, his tall frame moving with the same steady pace. The door chimed as he left. Unlike the others, he walked to the edge of the parking lot before vanishing into the darkness. I looked down at the note again, reading the 11 words over and over. He's lying. Jerry is not who you think he is. Be careful. The clock on the wall read 1:55 a.m. 5 minutes until 2 a.m. Rule 4, and never go outside between 2 and 3 a.m. for any reason. I folded the note and put it in my pocket next to Jerry's notebook. 3 of the 4 rules had happened exactly as written. But now I had to wonder, were these rules actually protecting me, Or were they serving some other purpose? Jerry had seemed genuinely concerned about my safety, but the tall man's warning suggested something else entirely. As the minute hand moved toward 2 a.m., I started questioning everything Jerry had told me. If he'd lied about the tall man, what else had he lied about? Was Craig Patterson really dead? Or was that story just meant to scare me into following rules that served Jerry's hidden agenda? The clock ticked closer to 2 a.m. and I looked out at the empty parking lot, wondering what would happen if I stepped outside during the forbidden hour. What was I being protected from? Or what was being protected from me? The rest of the night dragged on after my encounter with the tall man. I kept glancing at the clock as 2 a.m. arrived, but in the end, I stayed inside. Something about the tall man's warning made me hesitate to test Jerry's fourth rule, at least not without more information. Instead, I spent the remaining hours watching the door and jumping at every sound. The gas station remained dead quiet. No more customers with light bulb heads, women in red coats, or tall men with warnings. Just me, the noisy fluorescent lights, and too many questions. By the time dawn broke, my eyes were very dry from lack of sleep. The morning light coming through the windows should have been reassuring, but it wasn't. Night might be over, but I still couldn't shake the strange events. At 6:58 a.m., a sedan pulled into the parking lot. Jerry climbed out, looking as tired as I felt. He straightened his uniform shirt before walking toward the entrance. The morning shift change had arrived. The door chimed as he walked in. "Morning," he said, avoiding eye contact as he made his way behind the counter. "Any problems last night?" I watched him for a moment, trying to read his face. Actually, yeah, there was something. Jerry's hand paused halfway to the register. "What happened?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the note. "The tall man came in last night." Jerry's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly alert. "You saw him? Did he see you?" "Yeah, we had a conversation." "Well, sort of." I held up the folded paper. "He gave me this." Jerry's face went pale. His mouth opened and closed twice before he managed to speak. "You talked to him? You actually talked to him?" He didn't say anything. Just handed me this note. I unfolded it and placed it on the counter between us. Jerry snatched it up. As he read it, his face grew even paler. He crumpled the note. "You can't trust him," Jerry said, his voice shaking. "Thomas Wright is manipulating you." "Thomas Wright?" I kept my voice even. "You never mentioned his name before." Jerry looked like he'd been caught in a lie. He shoved the crumpled note into his pocket. "Thomas worked here years ago," Jerry said after a pause. "He's the one who killed Craig. I told you about finding what was left of Craig behind the dumpsters. That was Thomas's doing." There was something forced about Jerry's reaction, like he was improvising a story on the spot. "He wants you to distrust me," Jerry continued, his words coming faster now. "So you'll break the rules. That's how he gets to you." "Why would he want to get to me?" Jerry ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Look, there are things about this place I can't explain. That's why the rules exist. They keep you safe." He glanced at his watch. "You should go home and get some sleep. I'll see you tonight." The dismissal was obvious. I grabbed my jacket and went for the door, turning back one last time. Why does he look like that? His face. Jerry's expression hardened. Because he tried to break the rules. That's what happens. His tone became almost threatening. "Remember that, Michael." I nodded and left, the door chiming behind me. The drive back to my cousin's apartment took 15 minutes. Jerry knew the tall man's name. He'd called him Thomas Wright without hesitation, yet he'd never mentioned that detail before. And why would Thomas kill Craig? What would be his motive? My cousin had already left for work when I got back to the apartment. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, too wired to sleep. The confrontation with Jerry played over and over in my mind. I kept seeing his face when I showed him the note. Shocked, angry, and worst of all, afraid. After 2 cups of coffee, I opened my laptop. If Thomas Wright had worked at the gas station years ago, maybe there was some record online. I typed Thomas Wright Cedar Falls into the search bar. Nothing relevant came up. I tried Thomas Wright Sunny Valley gas station. Still nothing. Missing person Cedar Falls, I typed next. This search brought back several results. I clicked on the first one, a news article from 3 years ago about a college student who disappeared after a party. No connection to the gas station. The second was about an elderly man with dementia who wandered away from his home and was found 2 days later. The third article made me sit up straight. Local man missing. Police seek information. The story was from 2018 about Ethan Winters, 24, who disappeared after his night shift at a gas station on Highway 27, the Sunny Valley gas station. The police had found his car in the parking lot, but no sign of Ethan. The article mentioned there was no evidence of foul play. The case remained open. I kept digging. Over the next hour, I found 2 more cases, Ryan Murphy in 2016 and Daniel Cooper in 2013. Both had worked night shifts at the Sunny Valley gas station. Both had disappeared without a trace. Then I found the article that made me freeze, from 2015, headlined Local Business Owner Missing. Robert Garcia, 52, owner of Sunny Valley gas station, had disappeared shortly after hiring a new night clerk. The police statement mentioned that Mr. Garcia was last seen at the gas station on a Friday evening. When his daughter came to check on him the following Monday, the station was being operated by a new manager who claimed Garcia had hired him and then left town for personal reasons. The description of the new manager matched Jerry. I stared at the screen until my eyes burned. This couldn't be a coincidence. Multiple people connected to that gas station had vanished over the years. And based on the timeline in the articles, Jerry had appeared right around the time the owner disappeared. Sleep was impossible now. I paced around the apartment, trying to make sense of everything. Jerry's rules, the strange customers, Thomas Wright's warning, and now a pattern of disappearances all centered on that gas station on Highway 27. By the time evening came, I'd made a decision. I needed to find hard evidence. If Jerry was involved in these disappearances, there might be something at the gas station. Something linking him to Craig or the others. I arrived 30 minutes before my shift was scheduled to start. The parking lot was empty. Jerry's car wasn't there yet. I used my key to let myself in. The store was quiet, the only sound coming from the buzzing coolers along the back wall. I headed straight for the small office behind the counter. I'd only been in there once during my training when Jerry showed me where the safe was kept. The room was tiny, with barely enough space for a desk, filing cabinet, and small safe bolted to the floor. I started with the desk drawers. Nothing unusual, just paperwork, receipts, and office supplies. The filing cabinet contained employee records, but I found nothing for Thomas Wright or Craig Patterson. In fact, there were only 2 employee files, mine and Jerry's. My eyes moved to the air vent near the ceiling. It looked slightly crooked, the screws not fully tightened. I grabbed the desk chair and positioned it under the vent. Standing on it, I removed the loose screws and pulled the vent cover off. Inside was a plastic bag. I pulled it out. Inside the bag were a wallet and a phone. The wallet contained a driver's license for Craig Patterson, along with $37 and a few credit cards. The phone was older. Its screen cracked on one side. I pressed the power button, not expecting it to work after sitting in a vent for who knows how long. To my surprise, it lit up. The battery was at 12%. Just enough juice to check it. The phone was locked, but the notifications were visible on the screen. Dozens of text messages, all from the same contact, Jerry. I swiped up to see the preview of the most recent one. "Craig, where are you? You missed your shift again. Call me ASAP." The timestamp showed it was sent 3 days after Jerry claimed Craig had been killed. My hands shook as I put everything back in the bag and returned it to my pocket. I replaced the vent cover, tightened the screws, and moved the chair back to its original position. Just as I was closing the office door, I heard a car pull into the parking lot. I quickly moved behind the counter, pretending to check the register as Jerry walked in. "You're early," he said, eyeing me carefully. "Yeah, couldn't sleep well," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "Thought I might as well come in and get set up." Jerry nodded, but something in his expression had changed. He watched me with unusual intensity, like he was trying to read my thoughts. "Did you get any rest after your shift?" he asked, setting his bag down. "A little. First night was just a lot to take in." Jerry moved around the store, checking stock levels and straightening items on shelves. Every few minutes, I caught him glancing in my direction. "I was thinking about what you said this morning," I said, breaking the uncomfortable silence. "About Thomas, right?" Jerry stopped what he was doing. "What about him? You said he used to work here. What happened to him exactly?" Jerry's eyes narrowed. "He tried to break the rules. That's all you need to know." "Which rule?" "Rule 4. Jerry's voice dropped. "He went outside during the forbidden hour. Whatever's out there got to him, changed him. That's why his face is like that now." I nodded as if accepting his explanation. "And Craig, you're sure it was Thomas who I found what was left of him?" Jerry's tone grew harsh. "Don't let Wright fool you, Michael. He's dangerous. If you see him again, follow Rule 3. Hide." We went through the closing procedures in tense silence. As Jerry prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Speaking of the rules," he said, checking his watch, "remember Rule 4 tonight. It's particularly important. Don't go outside between 2 and 3 a.m., I recited. "For any reason." "Exactly." Jerry studied my face for a moment longer. "I'll see you in the morning." After he left, I pulled out Craig's phone again. The battery was now at 8%. I scrolled through the notification screen, reading the previews of text messages Jerry had sent after Craig supposedly died. "Craig, this is the 3rd shift you've missed. If you don't show up tonight, don't bother coming back. This is your final warning." Why would Jerry send these messages if he'd found Craig's remains behind the dumpsters? Unless Craig hadn't died at all. Unless Jerry was lying. I put the phone away and checked the time. 9:42 p.m. hours to go before 2 a.m. Light bulb head came in at his usual time, stayed exactly 9 minutes, and left when asked. Emma in her red coat bought her single beer without making eye contact. The night followed the pattern Jerry had described. Except this time, I knew what I was going to do. When 2 a.m. rolled around, I wasn't going to stay inside like Jerry insisted. I was going to break Rule 4. Whatever was outside, or whatever wasn't outside, I needed to know the truth. And if Jerry had lied about Craig, about Thomas, about everything else, then he was probably lying about this, too. The clock ticked closer to 2 a.m. I watched the second hand move, feeling scared but determined. If I stepped outside during the forbidden hour, I might finally understand what was happening at this gas station. Or I might end up like the others who had disappeared without a trace. At exactly 2 a.m., I pushed open the gas station door and stepped outside. The parking lot looked normal, bathed in the harsh glow of the overhead fluorescent lights. A moth fluttered around one of the fixtures, casting a tiny dancing shadow on the cracked asphalt below. I stood there for a moment, breathing faster than normal. The warm night air felt thick in my lungs. Part of me had expected something to happen immediately, maybe the sky to split open or some monster to appear, but there was nothing. Just the faint noise of occasional traffic on the highway and the buzz of insects in the grass beyond the lot. Jerry's warning kept playing in my mind. Never go outside between 2 and 3 a.m. for any reason. Yet here I was, breaking rule number 4, and the world hadn't ended. The revelation felt both anticlimactic and satisfying. Another of Jerry's lies exposed. I walked slowly across the parking lot, looking around for anything unusual. My footsteps sounded too loud in the quiet. I pulled out Craig's phone from my pocket and checked the time. 2:04 a.m. Still nothing strange. Near the edge of the property, I turned back to look at the gas station. From this angle, the bright lights inside made the windows shine in the darkness. I thought about the other employees who had worked here before me, Ryan Murphy, Daniel Cooper, and who knew how many others. Had they also stood out here in the dark, breaking Jerry's rules, trying to understand what was happening? I walked around the entire lot, staying alert for anything strange. The dumpsters sat at the far corner of the property, partially hidden from the main building by a small maintenance shed. This would be where Jerry claimed to have found Craig's remains. I walked up slowly, not entirely sure what I was looking for. Evidence of a struggle, bloodstains, some sign that Craig had actually died here. The area around the dumpsters looked clean. Too clean, actually. No scattered trash, no stains on the concrete pad beneath them. If something violent had happened here, someone had gone to great lengths to remove all traces of it. I checked the time again. 2:17 a.m. I'd been outside for 17 minutes, and nothing had happened. No mysterious entities, no supernatural events. Just a quiet night at a gas station with too many secrets. A car passed on the highway, its headlights briefly lighting up the trees at the edge of the property before disappearing around the bend. I sighed, starting to feel foolish. Maybe there was nothing to rule number 4. Maybe it was just another way for Jerry to control his employees. I turned to head back to the store when something caught my eye. The air near the dumpster started to look weird, wavy and distorted. I squinted, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The distortion grew worse. The space between the dumpsters and the maintenance shed began to bend and fold in a way that didn't seem possible. I backed up a step, suddenly unsure if breaking rule 4 had been a good idea after all. From within the warped space, someone appeared. Tall, wearing a wide-brimmed hat. Thomas Wright stepped through what looked like a hole in the air. The opening closed behind him, the air rippling before returning to normal. "You're finally ready to listen," he said, his voice rough but steady. I stood frozen, unable to process what I'd just witnessed. Thomas adjusted his hat, keeping the shadows across his disfigured face. "How did you—" I started. "The same way Jerry comes and goes," Thomas interrupted. "This place isn't what you think it is." I gestured to where he'd appeared. "What was that?" "Some kind of portal." "A weak point," Thomas explained. "There are places where the barriers between dimensions thin out. This gas station sits on one of those points." My mind raced to make sense of his words. "Like in sci-fi movies? Parallel universes?" Thomas made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Something like that, but much worse than fiction could imagine." He nodded toward the gas station. "And Jerry? He's not human. Never was." I felt a chill run through me, even though it was a warm night. "What is he then?" An entity that feeds on human life force, our years, our experiences. He consumes time. Thomas touched his scarred face. I got too close to understanding what he was. This was the result. I thought about the strange customers. Light bulb head and the woman in the red coat. And the rules? The people Jerry told me to watch out for. The rules aren't protecting you, Thomas said, his voice growing bitter. They're ensuring Jerry's feeding ritual remains uninterrupted. Light bulb head isn't a threat. He's a warning signal. When dimensions start to overlap, he appears. 9 minutes is how long the warning lasts before Jerry can sense it. That explained why nothing had attacked Light bulb head when his time was up. He simply left because his purpose was fulfilled. And the woman in the red coat? Emma? I asked. Thomas's expression softened slightly. Another victim trapped in a loop. Buying that beer is the only way she can interact with this world now. Jerry lets her have this small freedom. Maybe as a cruel joke, or maybe he needs her to keep things in check. I'm not sure. And you? Jerry said you killed Craig. Thomas shook his head. Jerry says that about all his victims. Blames the last employee who escaped before me. He blamed someone else, too. I pulled Craig's phone from my pocket. I found this hidden in the office. Jerry sent texts to Craig days after he claimed Craig was dead. Thomas nodded. Jerry leaves false trails. Makes it look like people just walked away from their lives. He's had decades to perfect his methods. Decades. The gas station didn't look that old. Come with me, Thomas said, moving toward the back of the dumpsters. I need to show you something. He took me to a spot behind the dumpsters where the concrete stuck out a few feet. It looked normal, but Thomas got down and put his hand on the ground. I was shocked when a line appeared in the concrete, revealing a hidden door. Jerry's not careful enough with his collection, Thomas said, lifting the hidden door to reveal a set of narrow stairs descending into darkness. I discovered this years ago when I worked here. I paused, but only for a moment. I'd come too far to back out now. Thomas pulled a small flashlight from his coat pocket and handed it to me. After you, he said. The stairs led down into a cellar that shouldn't exist. The space was small, maybe 15 feet square, with a low ceiling that made Thomas hunch over. My flashlight revealed shelves along the walls filled with personal items, watches, wallets, cell phones, car keys. The far wall had dozens of employee name tags, all lined up in neat rows. My God, I whispered, moving closer to examine them. The oldest tags were yellowed with age, going back to the 1970s. Yet the gas station had only been built in 2010, according to the permits I'd looked up online. Jerry has been here much longer than the building, Thomas explained, following my thoughts. The gas station changes, gets rebuilt, but the weak point remains, and so does he. Among the name tags, I spotted a blood-stained uniform shirt with Craig embroidered on the pocket. I reached out to touch it but stopped myself. How many people? I asked, my voice barely audible. I've counted 53 name tags, Thomas replied. But there could be more. I shone the flashlight across the collection of personal effects. Wallets that would have contained ID cards and family photos, phones that would have received worried texts from friends wondering where they'd gone. Lives interrupted, and then erased. The missing person reports only go back a few years, I said. If Jerry's been doing this for decades, why aren't there more reports, more investigations? Because Jerry doesn't just kill, he erases people from reality, absorbing their years, Thomas said. The longer he feeds, the more. Complete the erasure. Craig is still remembered because he was recent, but the others, he gestured to the oldest name tags. No one remembers them anymore. Their families have forgotten they existed. A sick feeling hit my stomach as I realized he was right. When I'd asked around town about previous gas station employees, most people couldn't remember anyone specific. The older cases had no online records, no newspaper stories, nothing except these keepsakes in Jerry's hidden collection. Why keep these things? I asked. If he wants to erase them, why hold on to their belongings? Trophies, maybe, Thomas suggested. Or maybe he needs them to maintain the erasure. I don't understand all of his methods. I walked along the shelves, looking at the items there. Some things looked really old, others seemed newer. My flashlight lit up a set of keys with a Cedar Falls Community College keychain, probably from one of the missing students I'd read about. How did you escape? I asked Thomas. He touched his scarred face again. I learned what he was and tried to fight back. I knew enough about the weak points to slip through during the forbidden hour, but not enough to protect myself from the damage it caused. I've been trying to warn his victims ever since, but Jerry's rules make it difficult. If employees follow them perfectly, I can't make contact. So, the rules are real. They're just not meant to protect us. Thomas nodded. Rule 3 keeps you from meeting me. Rule 4 keeps you from discovering this place. Rule 1 ensures you send away the warning before Jerry notices. And Rule 2, he stopped talking, looking upset. What about Rule 2? Emma buying the beer. A cruelty, Thomas said quietly. A reminder to Jerry of all his consumed. She was the first, you see, the original owner of this land. Every beer purchased is a token of remembrance, but also reinforces her imprisonment. I thought about Emma's cold hand when she'd handed me her credit card. How she wouldn't look at me. She seemed stuck in a routine, doing the same thing every night. How do we stop him? I asked. Together, Thomas replied. But not tonight. Jerry will return at dawn, and we need to be prepared. There's a ritual that can send him back and seal the weak point, but it requires items I don't have yet. I nodded, understanding. What do you need? Blood from the victims. There's enough here. He gestured to Craig's uniform. And something personal from someone who escaped. That would be me. But most importantly, we need someone connected to this reality who understands the truth. That's you, Michael. The way he said it made it sound like I'd been chosen for this, but that couldn't be right. I'd just been desperate enough to take a night shift job with bizarre requirements. We should leave, Thomas said, glancing at his watch. You've been out here too long. Jerry might sense something's wrong. We climbed back up the stairs, and Thomas sealed the trapdoor behind us. The concrete seemed solid again, with no visible seam or handle. If he hadn't shown me, I would never have known it existed. Come back tomorrow night, Thomas instructed. Make Jerry believe you followed all the rules tonight. Don't give him any reason to suspect. I will, I promised. Then a thought occurred to me. Wait, do you know Robert Garcia? The owner who disappeared when Jerry showed up. Thomas made a face. Another of Jerry's victims. Jerry takes identities sometimes, not just lives. He's probably worn many names over the decades. I thought about Sarah Garcia, still searching for answers about her father, just one of many who had lost someone to Jerry Foster. Be careful going back inside, Thomas warned. Act normal. I'll find you tomorrow. With that, he turned and walked toward the edge of the property where it was really dark. Just before he reached the trees, he stepped to the side and disappeared, leaving me alone in the parking lot. I checked the time. 2:47 a.m. I'd been outside for almost an hour during the forbidden time. Taking a deep breath, I headed back to the gas station, my head spinning from everything I'd learned. The store looked exactly as I'd left it. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The coolers made noise along the back wall. It all seemed so normal, yet nothing would ever be normal again. Not now that I knew what was hiding at the Sunny Valley gas station. I went back behind the counter, already planning what I would do when my shift ended. I needed to contact Sarah Garcia again, do more research on the history of this property. And tomorrow night, I would return prepared. Jerry Foster had taken his last victim. I spent the day after my discovery in the gas station cellar preparing for what would come next. Sleep wasn't an option, not with the knowledge that Jerry, or whatever he really was, had been consuming people for decades. I lay in bed for an hour staring at the ceiling of my cousin's guest room before giving up and getting to work. First, I called Sarah Garcia. We'd spoken briefly before when I was researching the missing employees, but now I needed more specific information about her father. She agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. Sarah looked tired when she arrived. She carried a thick folder stuffed with papers, her investigation into her father's disappearance. "I've been looking for my dad for 3 years," she said, spreading photos across the table. "The police gave up after 6 months. Said there wasn't enough evidence of foul play." The photo on top showed Robert Garcia standing proudly in front of the Sunny Valley gas station. He had gray hair at his temples and smile lines around his eyes. He seemed like the type who'd wave to regular customers by name. "Tell me about the new employee your father hired," I said. Sarah pulled out a statement she'd given police. "Dad called me the day before he disappeared. Said he'd hired someone to manage the night shift, a middle-aged guy who seemed experienced. 3 days later, I went to the station and found this new guy running everything. He told me Dad had sold him the business and left town. Was it this man?" I pulled out my phone and showed her a picture I'd secretly taken of Jerry. Her face grew serious. "That's him. Exactly him. And he hasn't aged a day in 3 years." We talked for another hour. Sarah shared everything she knew about her father and the gas station. The property had changed hands multiple times over the decades, with owners frequently disappearing without explanation. The current building was relatively new, but a gas station had stood on that spot since the 1970s. After leaving Sarah, I drove to a hardware store and bought supplies based on Thomas's instructions. Rock salt, iron filings, chalk, and a small pry bar. On my way back, I stopped at a Catholic supply store for holy water and at an herbalist shop for sage and other protective herbs. By late afternoon, I'd packed everything into a backpack. I tried to rest before my shift, but I couldn't stop thinking about questions. What exactly was Jerry? How had he existed for so long without being caught? And how many people had he erased from reality? I arrived at the gas station 30 minutes early. The parking lot was empty, so I had time to start my plan. I went straight to the storage room at the back of the building and hid my backpack behind some boxes. Then I pulled out a small pouch of salt and tucked it into my pocket. The door chimed as I walked back into the main store. Jerry stood at the counter, checking the register. "You're early," he said without looking up. "Couldn't sleep," I replied, trying to sound casual. "Figured I might as well come in." Jerry nodded, closing the register drawer. "Any problems last night? See any of our special customers?" I took a deep breath. Time to put on a show. "The light bulb guy came in," I said, making my voice shake slightly. "And he stayed too long." Jerry's head snapped up, his eyes suddenly focused on me. "What do you mean, too long?" I asked him to leave after 9 minutes like you said, but he just stood there staring at me. I ran a hand through my hair, acting distressed. He stayed for nearly 15 minutes before finally walking out. Jerry's face paled. He came around the counter and grabbed my arm. "What happened after that? Did you see anything unusual? Feel anything?" I pulled away from his grip. No, nothing happened. But I got scared, so I checked the rules again. You never told me what happens if he stays too long. Jerry paced back and forth, looking at his watch, then out the windows. The sun was setting in the parking lot. I need to check the perimeter, he muttered, heading for the door. Stay inside. Don't let anyone in until I get back. Perfect. This would give me time to finish setting up. As soon as Jerry was outside, I rushed to the storage room and pulled out my backpack. Thomas had said he would arrive around dusk, finding his way in through one of the weak points. Sure enough, when I opened the storage room door, Thomas was there, coming through what looked like a crack in the air near the back wall. He gave me a serious nod. You got everything? He asked. I showed him the supplies I'd bought: salt, iron, holy water, chalk, everything you mentioned. Good. Thomas took the chalk and began drawing symbols on the floor. We need to work quickly. Did you distract Jerry? Told him light bulb had stayed too long last night. He went to check the perimeter. Thomas nodded, continuing his work. Smart. That will worry him. It means the boundaries are already weakening. I got the items I'd grabbed from the cellar the night before, Craig's bloody name tag and a small token with Thomas's initials that he'd left behind years ago. Will these work for the ritual? I asked. Thomas examined them. Yes. The blood of a victim and something personal from someone who escaped. Now we just need. The storage room door banged open. Jerry stood there, his face twisted with rage. I knew it, he spat. You broke rule for last night. You went outside during the forbidden hour. I backed up a step. Jerry, I can explain. You can't explain anything. Jerry snarled, moving toward me. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Actually, I said, reaching into my pocket. I know exactly what you're dealing with. You're not human. You consume people. Erase them from existence. Jerry stopped, his head tilting at an odd angle. Who told you that? Was it him? He pointed at Thomas. The rule breaker. The one I warned you about. No, I said. It was your collection in the cellar that told me. All those name tags, wallets, phones, trophies from the people you've erased. Jerry's face began to change. His mouth stretched wider than humanly possible, his eyes darkening until they were hollow black pits. You went into my special place, he said, his voice distorting. Touch my things. He lunged forward, hands changing into claw-like things. I pulled the pouch from my pocket and threw a line of salt between us. Jerry howled as he hit the invisible barrier, jumping back like he'd been burned. The salt line glowed faintly blue where he'd touched it. What happens if light bulb head stays too long? I asked, backing toward Thomas. You never answered my question. Jerry hissed, circling the edge of the salt line like a predator looking for a way in. When he stays, the barriers weaken. The worlds start to bleed together, letting things cross over, I said. Things like you. Jerry's face did something that looked like a smile but wasn't quite right. I've gone by many different names over the years. Jerry Foster is just the newest one. He pointed at the gas station around us. This place sits right on top of where worlds get thin. Found it ages ago. Perfect for feeding. And the rules? I asked, buying time as Thomas continued preparing the ritual behind me. They're not for protection, are they? Oh, they protect something, Jerry said, his voice changing pitch erratically. They protect my feeding ritual. Rule 1 ensures the warning signal doesn't alert others to my presence. Rule 3 keeps troublemakers like him, he pointed at Thomas, from interfering. And Rule 4, he laughed, a hollow sound that echoed strangely in the small room. rule for keeps you from discovering what's underneath. The cellar, I said. Your collection. My anchors, Jerry corrected. Each item ties me to this world. Gives me form and substance. The more I collect, the stronger I become. He pressed a clawed hand against the invisible barrier, making the salt line glow brighter. And you, Michael Henderson, will make a fine addition. Like you added Robert Garcia. I asked. And Craig Patterson and all the others whose names no one remembers anymore. Jerry's body seemed to flicker, stretching taller, limbs growing longer. Time is such a delicious thing to consume. Years of potential, decades of memories, all gone into the void. He pressed harder against the barrier, and I saw the salt line beginning to break. Run, Thomas whispered urgently. To the main floor. We need more space. I didn't need to be told twice. As Jerry broke through the salt line with a triumphant howl, I ran past him and sprinted down the hallway toward the main store, Thomas right behind me. The fluorescent lights began to flicker as we ran. The entire building seemed to shake, and the air grew thick and hard to breathe. We rushed into the main area of the store. I pulled more salt from my backpack and quickly laid down another line across the doorway just as Jerry appeared at the end of the hallway, moving with a jerky, inhuman gait. You can't escape, Jerry called, his voice echoing as if coming from multiple directions at once. This is my domain. I control everything here. The lights continued to flash more rapidly, some of them bursting in showers of sparks. The coolers along the back wall began to vibrate, their glass doors rattling in their frames. The ritual, Thomas said, pulling out the items we'd gathered. We need to start now. I nodded, helping him arrange the items in a small circle on the floor, Craig's bloody name tag, Thomas's token, the iron filings, the chalk symbols copied from the ones he'd drawn in the storage room. Jerry reached the salt line at the doorway and stopped, hissing in frustration. His body kept changing, sometimes looking almost human, other times stretching into something impossibly tall and thin with too many joints and angles that hurt to look at. You think your little ritual will work? Jerry sneered. Others have tried. Their remains are in my collection, too. I tried to block out his words, focusing instead on what Thomas had told us to do. We needed to say the names of the victims, calling them from Jerry's collection to weaken his hold on this reality. Craig Patterson, Thomas began, his voice steady. Robert Garcia, I added. With each name, Jerry seemed to flinch slightly, his body looking shakier. We continued through the names we knew, the missing employees I'd researched, the owners who had disappeared. You're too late, Jerry said, his voice now a harsh whisper. I've already begun to feed. He pointed behind us. I turned to see the front door of the gas station swing open. A person walked in. A woman in a red coat. Emma, I breathed, recognizing her immediately. For the first time, she looked directly at me. Her eyes were clear and aware, not vacant as they had been during our previous encounters. She walked toward us, stepping carefully over the ritual items on the floor. I can help you, she said, her voice soft but determined. It was the first time I'd heard her speak. Jerry hissed, pressing against the salt barrier. No. You can't break your cycle. You're bound to the ritual. Emma turned to face Jerry, her expression hardening. I've been trapped for decades, forced to play my part in your feeding ritual, buying that beer night after night, a mockery of remembrance for each new victim. She looked back at me. I wasn't just a customer. I was trying to warn you. It was the only action his curse allowed me to take. The first owner, Thomas explained quietly. The original owner of this land before Jerry came through. Emma nodded. I discovered what he was, just as you have. She gestured to the ritual circle. And now I can finally help stop him. The lights flickered more violently, and the glass in the front windows began to vibrate. Outside, the night had grown unnaturally dark, as if all light was being sucked toward the gas station. Emma knelt beside our ritual circle. "Add my name," she said. "Emma Blackwood." It's been so long since anyone has spoken it. I looked at Thomas, who nodded encouragement. "She's right. With her help, we might actually succeed." Jerry howled from the doorway, his body expanding until it filled the entire frame. The salt line was weakening, small gaps appearing where the grains had been scattered. "You'll all join my collection," Jerry threatened, his voice distorting. "I'll feed on your years, erase you from memory, keep only tokens to anchor your energy to my realm." Emma took my hand, her touch no longer cold, but warm and human. "We need to hurry," she said. "The boundaries are failing. Soon, more of his kind will come through." I looked from Emma to Thomas, then back to the monster Jerry pushing against our failing barrier. The final showdown was about to begin, and everything depended on us finishing the ritual before the walls between worlds collapsed completely. We burst through the gas station doors into the parking lot at 2:30 a.m., carrying our ritual supplies. The asphalt felt unnaturally warm under my feet in the cool night air. Behind us, the windows of the store pulsed with an eerie light as reality continued to warp inside. "We need more space," Thomas said, his scarred face tense with concentration. "The energies are too volatile to contain indoors." Emma nodded. "Out here, between worlds, we'll have more control over the ritual." Jerry followed us outside, but he didn't look human anymore. His arms and legs had stretched impossibly long, with joints bending in ways that hurt to look at. His face was all distorted, his mouth split impossibly wide, showing rows of jagged teeth like broken glass. Only his eyes still looked familiar, they were just black holes that seemed to suck in all the light around them. "You think you can stop me?" Jerry's voice came from everywhere at once, echoing across the empty parking lot. "I've existed for centuries, feeding on the forgotten." We spread out, forming a triangle around him, just as Thomas had instructed. I held the iron pipe I'd grabbed from the store's maintenance closet. In my pocket, I had Craig's bloody name tag, our link to Jerry's victims. "Now," Thomas commanded, sprinkling salt in a circle around Jerry. The three of us began to recite the names of those Jerry had consumed over the decades. With each name, Jerry twitched and recoiled, as if the words caused him pain. "Craig Patterson," I called out. "Robert Garcia," Emma added. "Daniel Cooper," Thomas continued. We worked through the list of names we'd memorized from the cellar collection. With each one, Jerry's body grew more unstable, his edges becoming fuzzy. Ryan Murphy, Ethan Winters, James Sullivan. Jerry let out a shriek that shattered the glass of the gas station windows behind us. His body contracted, then expanded, growing taller until he towered above us. "Enough," he roared, lashing out with one elongated arm. I ducked as his claws whistled over my head. Thomas kept going with the ritual, his voice remaining steady despite the danger. William Foster, 1994. George Kennedy, 1987. Jerry turned toward Thomas, rage twisting his already distorted face. I saw my chance and hit him with the iron pipe as hard as I could, smashing what passed for Jerry's face. The impact sent shockwaves up my arms, but Jerry recoiled with a hiss of pain. Black goo dripping from the wound. "You're just food," Jerry spat, his words gurgling through the damage I'd caused. "All of you, just walking time for me to consume." Emma pulled a small pouch from her coat pocket and sprinkled salt, iron filings, and dried herbs in a circle around Jerry. Her lips moved constantly as she recited more names, going back decades. Alice Thornton, 1976. David Miller, 1982. The ground beneath Jerry began to tremble. Small cracks appeared in the asphalt, spreading outward from where he stood. Jerry thrashed wildly, his limbs flailing everywhere. Samuel Wilson, 1965. Thomas called out, his voice growing stronger with each name. I dodged another attack from Jerry and continued my part of the ritual, pulling out Craig's name tag and holding it up. "We release you, Craig Patterson, return to the light." The name tag burst into blue flame in my hand, the fabric burning away to nothing. The cracks in the pavement widened, revealing not dirt or concrete beneath, but a swirling vortex of darkness shot through with flashes of purple light. The air filled with a high-pitched whine that made my teeth ache. Jerry's body began to break apart, pieces of him dissolving into the air. But he wasn't going quietly. With a final surge of effort, he lunged toward me, claws extended. I tried to back away, but he caught my ankle, his grip cold and burning simultaneously. "If I go back, you're coming with me," Jerry snarled, pulling me toward the expanding vortex. I struggled to break free, digging my fingers into the asphalt, but his strength was inhuman. My body slid inch by inch toward the swirling darkness. Thomas looked at me, then at Jerry, and I saw something change in his expression. He pulled a small metal token from his pocket, the same one we'd used in the ritual, and pressed it against his scarred face. "One more name," Thomas said quietly. "Thomas Wright, 1997. Before I could react, Thomas ran at Jerry and tackled him. The impact broke Jerry's grip on my ankle, and I scrambled backward as both Thomas and Jerry teetered on the edge of the vortex. "Thomas, no!" I reached out, but it was too late. With a grim smile, Thomas wrapped his arms around Jerry's writhing body and let himself fall backward into the swirling darkness. Jerry's shriek of rage cut off abruptly as they disappeared from view. The vortex began to contract almost immediately, the edges pulling inward. Emma rushed to the edge but grabbed my arm when I tried to follow. "Stop! You can't help him now. We have to get him out." I struggled against her grip, surprised by her strength. "Thomas knew what he was doing," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "He's wanted this release for decades. The pain of existing between worlds was worse than any death." I watched helplessly as the portal grew smaller, the cracks in the asphalt sealing themselves. The whining sound faded, replaced by the normal ambient noise of a gas station at night, the buzz of the refrigeration units, the distant sound of traffic on the highway. "Is he?" I couldn't finish the question. "Gone," Emma confirmed, but at peace. What happened to Thomas when he escaped the first time left him trapped between realities. This was his way of finally finding rest. I looked at Emma and noticed I could see through her. She was fading, becoming transparent around the edges. Her red coat was losing its color, changing from bright red to pale pink, then to nothing. "You're disappearing," I said, reaching out to her but finding my hand pass right through her arm. Emma looked down at herself with a mix of wonder and sadness. "Jerry's curse is broken. I'm free." She smiled, and for the first time since I'd met her, the expression reached her eyes. "After 70 years of buying that beer every night, I can finally move on." "Where will you go?" I asked. "I don't know," she admitted. "But anywhere is better than being trapped in that loop." Her form grew fainter, but before she vanished completely, she gripped my shoulder, her touch now warm and light as a breeze. "Be careful, Michael," she warned. "Weak points between worlds exist everywhere. Gas stations, motels, abandoned buildings, places that sit on the edges of human consciousness. They're often guarded by rules that seem nonsensical but hold dark purposes. If I ever see a list of strange rules again, I'll run the other way, I promised." Emma smiled one last time, then disappeared, leaving me alone in the gas station parking lot. I stood there for a long time, staring at the spot where the vortex had been. The asphalt looked normal now, without even a crack to show what had happened. The gas station behind me had stopped glowing, with only the broken windows evidence of our fight. By morning, even those wouldn't seem as bad. The sunrise would make the broken glass look like regular vandalism, something that would be fixed with a phone call, written off as kids causing trouble. I went back inside and wrote a quit note, leaving it on the counter with my name tag. There was no way to explain what had happened, and I didn't want to be there when the morning shift showed up and saw the damage. As I walked to my car, I looked back at the Sunny Valley gas station. It appeared normal in the early morning light. No one driving by would ever guess what had happened there, or how many people it had claimed over the years. 3 months later, I was still living with my cousin in Cedar Falls, though I'd found a better job and was saving for my own place. The gas station incident felt like a bad dream that grew hazier each day. I was walking downtown when I saw a new business had opened, Midnight Mario's Pizza. The logo showed a cartoon Italian chef with an unnaturally wide smile. Something about it made me stop and look closer. That's when I saw the small sign posted near the entrance. Rules for customers after midnight. The list had 5 items, each more bizarre than the last. 1. Do not order the special unless you're prepared to give something in return. 2. If the delivery driver has red eyes, do not invite them inside your home. 3. Ignore the sounds coming from the freezer. 4. Never ask about the secret ingredient. 5. If your pizza arrives uncut, leave it on your doorstep and do not return home until sunrise. I felt a chill as I read the list. I thought about Emma's warning about weak points between worlds and the rules that guarded them. A young man in a Midnight Mario's uniform stepped outside, looking tired and slightly confused, exactly how I'd felt on my first night at Sunny Valley. He saw me looking at the sign and smiled nervously. First day on the job, he explained. Night shift. They've got some weird rules here, but the pay is good. I opened my mouth to warn him, to tell him everything I knew about strange rules and the dangers they concealed. But would he believe me? Would anyone? Instead, I just nodded and walked away, trying to push away thoughts of what might await the young employee when midnight came. I'd escaped my brush with the supernatural, but I couldn't save everyone from making the same mistakes. As I turned the corner, I wondered who would be the first to order the special, or what happened when the delivery driver's eyes turned red. And most of all, I wondered about the new night shift employee who would encounter whatever waited inside Midnight Mario's Pizza after dark.